Hey everybody, I've had a bunch of questions lately of people asking me how I do this two-tone effect on my leatherwork where I have the dark in the background and then I keep my tooling a lighter color. So I figured I'd get on here and make a quick video about it. I've got some spur straps here that I've tooled up and I'm going to show you how I achieve this effect. It's nothing too surprising, honestly. Some people thought maybe I was somehow dark oiling parts of it and then leaving the rest of it a light oil. There is oil involved, but by and large, it is going to be dye work. And I can get away with this effect on a lot of things, right? These are our spur straps and stuff. The only thing I wouldn't do this on is probably a saddle, because there is always that chance of the dye rubbing off onto your pants. So this is super simple, but it takes a little bit of practice to get correct. I'm going to put my gloves on here, and what I'm doing is I'm going to be painting with the dye, which is not as easy as painting with a regular acrylic based leather paint, but it's not too bad either. So I'll crack this open. I'm going to find a brush that I like. There we go. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just load up my brush with dye, and I'm going to paint in the background. Now, this tooling pattern is kind of funky. I have some background here that I've bar grounded, but then my tooling pattern kind of officially ends, quote unquote, and I just have smooth background here. Both parts are going to get dyed the same. I'm going to also do this border around here the same color. You can change that if you want. It's totally up to you, but I just come in here with the dye. Now, the tendency for dye is it's going to want to run. So I always put it down in the middle and let it run out to wherever it wants to go. I don't come straight to the edge right away. I let the dye bleed into the edge. If I were to go straight to the edge, it would bleed into my tooling, which is not what I want. And it might take a couple of layers to get this down perfectly, and get a nice, smooth, even tone. But take your time. Try not to let your dye splash like that just did. But if it does just a little bit like it did there, it's not a huge deal, because I will be antiquing this afterwards. But what I like to do is I like to start and do all of my edge work dyeing. So anything that touches the border and also the border itself. And then I go back into the middle and do all of the center backgrounding. So I'm just going around. You can use any leather dye for this. My favorite is the Fibings Pro dye. This is dark brown. You can use any color, although I do definitely prefer the darker colors for backgrounding. And like I said, you can use any leather dye, as long as it is liquid like this. If it's a paste, that's probably an antique gel, or if it comes out like paint, it probably is paint. So we're just going around and painting in the background. Okay, so I've gotten all of my edges dyed, and I've gotten everything, all of the backgrounding that touches the edges dyed. Now I have to do this middle backgrounding here. This is where it gets a little bit more tricky, because like I said, the dye is going to want to run and bleed. And so you have to be careful how much dye you have loaded into your brush. So what I like to do for this is I'll take a scrap piece of leather or something else that I'm dyeing the same color. So this is the other part of the spur strap here. This whole thing is just going to be dark brown. So what I can do is I can load my brush and I can just kind of dab it a little bit, and then I can come in with a little bit less dye on my brush and keep filling in that middle background. And I do that a lot. The smaller the piece of background that I have, the less dye I'm going to want on my brush. The bigger it is, the more I can let that dye bleed, and the less I have to worry and the more dye I can have on my brush. But for these smaller ones, just going very slowly. What is nice is that the tooling is obviously three-dimensional, and so you can kind of feel with your brush where it has to end, because you can feel your beveling. But like I said, you do still have to be careful on letting that dye bleed. So just very, very carefully coming in here and filling in everything. And I do work kind of from the biggest to the smallest piece of my background, more or less. Not perfect about it, but. And you can switch to a smaller brush. I kind of just rock with this one brush the whole time. It kind of does the job for me. Maybe I'll invest in better brushes at some point. But that's only if you buy leatherwork from me, and I have the money to do it. So go to heftleatherandsaddlery.com or hit me up and place an order. Shameless plug. All right, so there we go. The whole thing is dyed. I'm going to come back through a little bit here and just touch up any light spots, just with the dye that I have already on my brush. It's already on there. I paid for it. I might as well use it for something instead of just dunking it in the water and wasting it. You might have more or less on this these lighter areas depending on how long you've been doing this, and it just depends. The better you get at it, the less you'll have to do it. But so there's the first spur strap done. What I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna just dye the rest of this because I already have my dye out, and then I'm gonna come back and I'm going to oil this. So I've gotten these dyed, and now it's time for oil. You can use pretty much any kind of oil for this. Olive oil, peanut oil, vegetable oil. I'm using 100% pure neatsful oil. That's what I like the most, because if I want to, I can get the darkest finish with it. I used to use olive oil, and I was kind of having a hard time getting a dark oil on there if I wanted it. But with the neatsful oil, I can do a light oil, I can do a dark oil, and it works out for me. So what I'm doing now is I have a piece of sheepskin here. I'm gonna put some oil on it, and I'm just gonna go over the whole piece, getting my tooling a little bit darker. You can go as light or as dark as you want. At a certain point, I guess it could get too dark just because it starts to blend in with your tooling, but it's completely up to you. And then in between coats of oil, I'm gonna let them kind of sit and soak in. As you can see, each piece of leather is going to react differently. These two pieces of leather are cut from the same hide. They weren't cut super close to each other though, just because I was working through scrap. So this piece took the oil a lot darker the first time. I'm probably going to leave that with just that coat there. This one needs a little bit more work to match the other one, so I'll let this oil soak in. I'll probably give it one more coat, and then we'll move on from there. All right, so I've gotten these oiled. What I'm going to do now is do my antiquing process. And what that is I have all of this detail work and all of my tooling here, all of my stamping, all of my decorative cuts. And what I want to do is really highlight that and show it off. And so I'm going to use two different things here. The first is some kind of resist. I'm using Fibings Tan Coat. You can use any kind of resist. You can use Fibings Pro Resist. You can use Resolene. Pretty much anything. This is my favorite just because you can still oil the leather afterwards, like in the future after you've used the product a bunch, and it will still penetrate. If you use like the Pro Resist, it doesn't take oil after you've put it on. The other thing I'm going to be using is some kind of antique finish. I'm using Fibings. This video is not sponsored by Fibings, although maybe it should be. I just really like their stuff. I'm using Fibings dark brown antique finish. So it's going to be similar to the dark brown Pro Dye. It's not exactly the same, but it's pretty close. It doesn't have to be the same color as your dye. There is also, if I grab it, there's also the neutral antique finish, which you can mix with dye or paint to come up with any kind of wacky color, like turquoise, blue, white, whatever you want. But for this kind of Western style, I'm going to stick with the dark brown here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my tan coat. I'm going to take more sheepskin. I'm going to put some on there. I'm going to put a nice layer on my spur straps or whatever it is you're working on. I'm going to do both at once here, just for time's sake. I'm running out of tan coat. Okay, now some people mix their tan coat and their antique. Some people let the tan coat dry and then do the antique, let the antique dry. I kind of mix the two. I don't wait for my antique or my tan coat to dry, and I don't wait for the antique to dry either. I just kind of keep on rolling, and not just because it's efficient, but also it's genuinely what has given me the best success. So I'm going to smear some of this antique onto a piece of sheepskin, and I'm going to rub it in real good. Just like that. This is always the scary part where you're like, oh my gosh, did I just ruin my project? Then I take another piece of sheepskin and I wipe it all off. Just like that. And what is left behind is the antique will sit down in all of your tooling, and it will show it off. And so I kind of bend it sometimes here to pull the antique up out of anywhere I don't want it. I don't know if that is a proper leatherworking technique, but it's what I do. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing on the other piece here. I'll get a little bit more of my resist or my tan coat. No, antique words. And I'm going to smear it on in there. Some people use a toothbrush for this. I used to use paper towels, but I like the sheepskin the best. And then I'm going to wipe it right off. I did a little bit darker of an oil finish on this one than I do on some other things. On this notebook cover here, I don't think I actually oiled it at all. If you want a really, really light two-tone color. But totally up to you. And these are spur straps, right? These are close to the dirt, so having a little bit darker of a color, but still having that two-tone is not a bad thing because they're going to get dirty. But I'm going to kind of roll it, let that do its thing. Okay, now from here, you can absolutely let your antique sit and dry. Sometimes I do. It depends on kind of my mood and what I have to do next. But the next step is This has all kind of gotten a little bit dull. So what I like to do is I will come back through with one more layer of tan coat just to freshen it up. And while I'm here, I'm really running out of tan coat. There we go. While I'm here, I'm also going to do these ones. So tan coat, or any of the resists that I mentioned earlier, Resolene, Pro Resist, even Leather Balm, although I don't like to use that for antiquing. They serve two functions. One is to be resist against the antique. The other is to seal your leather. So we sealed the leather, or rather we resisted it against the antique. Then we put the antique in. Then we're going to seal the antique in with another layer of the tan coat. So that just about does it. Depending on what I feel like doing, maybe I'll add another layer of oil once this is dried, just very, very lightly. Totally not necessary though. But yeah, that is how I achieve my two-tone effect on my leatherwork. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and let me know if you like more of this content instead of just my Tuesday talks all the time. And I will see you guys real soon.